This week, the British government published a groundbreaking report on immigration and integration in British society. It sent shockwaves throughout Whitehall and rocked the Liberal establishment. The report, produced by Dame Louise Casey for the Department for Communities and Local Government, was commissioned by the former Prime Minister David Cameron and former Home Secretary Theresa May to review the impact of mass immigration on our society. The report gives disturbing evidence that some 75% of British Muslims living in ghettos across the country lead such separate lives that they believe the UK is an Islamic country. It also found that most think that the majority of the UK population share their faith and beliefs. Now, for the first time in over 2 decades, there is an openness to discuss the dangers of Islamisation and uncontrolled mass migration. Previous British governments and the Liberal establishment have sought to label those who spoke out on these issues as racist or bigots. They used political correctness to close down debate on these important issues.
I was really struck by the street when I came to it. Down this side of the road, there are 5 mosques, all built in incredibly close proximity to each other. On this side of the road, you've still got a formerly white British community, both communities living cheek by jowl, and sometimes that can cause real tensions. I don't really blame either of the groups for that. It's entirely understandable and natural for people to want to live near others that are like themselves. But it is time for politicians, community leaders, public servants, religious leaders to start to have honest conversations about the difficult issues that these raise. We can't expect, with the high levels of immigration that we've been having, for integration just to take care of itself. We've got to be better at managing that integration so that we live together as one community and not 2.
There is now a growing realisation in this nation and other Western countries that our great Western civilization is in moral decline. We've seen the erosion of our Judeo-Christian heritage beyond any recognition. For decades, the liberal social engineers have undermined our biblical heritage by attempting to create a new multicultural society, resulting in a spiritual and political vacuum that has now been filled by Islamic extremism. The danger of not addressing the issue of Islamic extremism puts our freedom under threat. Therefore, this government report and its findings are so significant. The report stated that there were an estimated 65.1 million people living in the UK in June 2015, with the population having risen by 4.1 million between 2001 and 2011. More than half of this growth was due to immigration. The report highlighted that the UK is an ageing population with increased life expectancy and the impact of a baby boomer generation with higher birth rates moving into older age groups, but with ethnic minority groups generally having a younger age profile. The report explained that the UK is increasingly ethnically diverse, although 8 out of 10 UK citizens identify themselves as white British in the 2011 census. The white British population was reduced by 0.4 million people, while other ethnic minority groups grew. The largest growth was Polish and Asian migrants, up by 0.4 and 0.5 million. The report found that the UK remains predominantly religious, with nearly 7 out of 10 people belonging to a religious faith. Christians remain a majority, while a quarter of the population holds no religious beliefs at all. But sadly, the proportion of Christians has fallen from 70% to 59%, while those holding no religion grew from 17% to 26%. Among faith groups, the number of people identifying themselves as Muslims grew significantly by 1.2 million people. This 72% increase is higher than any other religious group, and Muslims make up the largest non-Christian religious population in the UK at 2.8 million in total. The report goes on to discuss how Islamic subcultures have been created in this country, as some Muslims are cut off from the rest of Britain, with their own housing estates, schools and television channels. The report also discusses how thousands of Muslims living in northern cities, such as Bradford, Dewsbury and Blackburn, rarely, if ever, leave their areas and have almost no idea of life outside.
In the current febrile atmosphere in this country, and to celebrate everything that is good about British diversity, We've got to focus much more and do much more on what brings us together as one community, one set of values, one set of institutions, and not focus on what is driving us apart. And a failure to do so only leaves the ground open for, on the one hand, Islamist extremists, and on the other, the extreme far right.
The report found that ghettos have been formed because of the pace and scale of immigration has been too much, and some towns and cities have been transformed out of all recognition. When questioned for this report, 23% of British Muslims stated they supported the introduction of Sharia law instead of British law, with 31% saying it's acceptable for a man to have more than one wife, and 32% refused to condemn people who took part in violence against those who mocked the Prophet Muhammad. The report openly criticised the rise of Sharia councils, which have been allowed to run unhindered, and in some cases supporting extremist values such as wife-beating, forced marriage and marital rape. It found that mosques and Islamic organisations are offering regressive advice about the behaviours expected of Muslim women and girls. This includes not being able to leave the house without telling their husband, not being allowed to travel without a chaperone, or even not being able to wear jeans, despite Islamic theologians dismissing such advice as inappropriate. This report is highly critical of previous British governments who have ignored or even condoned regressive, divisive and harmful cultural and religious practices for fear of being branded racist or Islamophobic. Tony Blair's Labour government in the late 1990s deliberately pursued a policy of uncontrolled immigration, as Peter Mandelson, the architect of New Labour, disclosed in a rare interview in May 2013. He said, "There was a driving political purpose that mass immigration was the way that the government was going to make the UK truly multicultural. Labour sent out search parties for immigrants to get them to come to the UK to work. This mass immigration crisis can be blamed on Tony Blair's New Labour project to cynically increase voter support for the Labour Party and to accelerate the process of multiculturalism in the UK and Europe." During the time of Tony Blair's government, the shocking events of child exploitation in Rotherham by Pakistani men was overlooked due to a culture of political correctness that prevented governmental departments and the police from investigating the horrific child abuse in fear that they would be branded racist or Islamophobic, thus tragically not putting the safety and well-being of the children at the heart of policy. The cases of child sexual exploitation in Rotherham was catastrophic examples of authorities turning a blind eye to avoid the need to confront a particular community. The town saw up to 1,400 children sexually exploited over more than a decade, groomed predominantly by Pakistani men offering drugs, alcohol and attention, followed by sexual abuse and mental and physical coercion. The Casey report has multiple recommendations for Theresa May's government to address, such as school children being taught British values of tolerance, democracy and respect, as well as the country's laws, history and values. More English language classes for isolated groups, empowering women to reject regressive cultural practices, violence and abuse, action to tackle regressive and harmful practices in Muslim communities such as forced marriages, female genital mutilation and other abuses. Leading member of the Islamic community, Mohammed Safiq, Chief Executive of the Ramadan Foundation, attacked the report with the following statement quoted in the Daily Mail on Monday, the 5th of December 2016, by saying, "The report is inflammatory, divisive and pandering to the agenda of the far right. We are saddened that once again the British Muslims have become a political football which is banished from time to time without any regard for the impact this has on individuals who are then subjected to threats and violence." There's no doubt that the far right will seize on this report and will use it to stoke up religious and racial tension. But Mohammed Safiq's remarks pose more questions than they do answers, and that he does not want to acknowledge the huge problem that exists in his community in support of extremist ideologies that pose a direct threat to our security and way of life. The Casey report is to be welcomed, and in post-Brexit Britain there is a new openness to discuss and confront difficult issues that British society is facing today. The establishment's obsession with creating a new multicultural society that has been protected by political correctness has been a complete and total failure and has opened the door to the Islamisation of Britain. Previous British governments can be blamed for this mess by not controlling mass immigration and not confronting the radicalisation and extremism taking place within many Islamic communities in Britain. What is missing from this report is the urgent need to restore and rebuild our Judeo-Christian heritage that has been the cornerstone of Western civilization for over 2,000 years, to recognise the sovereignty of God rather than man. The government is offering the Muslim community the values of secular humanism and materialism as a means to counter extremism. But this will never defeat Islamic extremism because liberalism is centred on the worship of self rather than the interests and needs of others. It is only being Christianity that has protected our liberties, and Christians need to be confident and assertive about their faith in Jesus Christ and the impact that the gospel has had upon shaping the history and destiny of this nation. In this nation's history, we have seen countless divine, supernatural interventions down the centuries, from the time of King Alfred and the defeat of the Vikings to Queen Elizabeth I's victory over the Spanish Armada in 1588, to the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, and countless deliverances during the Second World War in our battle against evil of Nazism. The answer to the nation's problems is outlined in the Word of God in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14. If my people, who are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I'll hear from heaven, will forgive their sins and heal their land.